Hi guys, welcome back to Asher Books. So today I'm going to do a recommendations video on some of my favorite fantasy romance books. So I absolutely love a good fantasy romance, and I've been reading quite a few of them lately, so that kind of like inspired me to make this video just because they were kind of like on my mind. Also, I've mentioned this before, but I read a lot more fantasy type books in the fall and winter than I do in the summer or like spring. So I thought it would be a perfect time just in case you're like me and you're kind of looking for something to read during these next couple of months. Also, just in case anyone's kind of confused or maybe like newer to the genre or something like that, there is definitely a difference between a fantasy with a like romance subplot and a fantasy romance book. To me, I'm not like a specialist here, but to me, a lot of books have great romance subplots in them. I think we all can know a couple of those, which are great as well. But most of these I'm going to talk about are definitely more a fantasy romance, which is kind of like a subgenre of romance, which to me the difference is it's like 50% romance, 50% fantasy. Like you really couldn't have the fantasy work without the romance, or it's a very large chunk of it. Hope that makes sense. But yeah, so some of these are my absolute favorites. As I go through them, I'm definitely going to mention like if I think it might be a good book to start with, if you're trying to like dip your toe into that kind of fantasy romance genre, like if you're a fantasy reader or a romance reader. So hopefully you guys will find one of these that you might want to check out. Okay, so the first book I'm going to mention, just to kind of put it out there, that to me this reads like a fantasy romance, and that is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. This one is, of course, A Court of Mist and Fury. To me, this reads more like a fantasy romance than a fantasy with romance subplot, just because if you've read it, you know it's a very large part of the book. I love this series. It's one of my absolute favorites, and I definitely think it reads more like a new adult or an adult romance than a YA. I think a lot of people probably agree with me. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on this series, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because I think we all know it, but I wanted to throw it out there. If you're kind of like not sure, but you're a romance reader, I definitely would suggest giving this one a try because I think it's going to appeal to you almost more than it would appeal to someone who loves fantasy alone. So put it out there. I love, love, love Feyre and the whole story. I think it's fabulous. So if you haven't picked this up, you've been living under a rock or something, definitely give it a try. Next is probably not going to come as a surprise to anybody who's been around for a little bit with me, and that is the Kingmaker Chronicles by Amanda Boucher. I recommend this one all the time, but I had to include it because it's one of my favorites. This one is A Promise of Fire, which is the first book. It's a trilogy, and I just think this book has everything. So this book follows our main character, Kat, who in the beginning of the book is kind of hiding as a soothsayer in this like traveling carnival, but there's a lot more to her than that, and she's kind of trying to hide her powers. So she is found in the beginning of the book by our hero, who his family has recently gotten control basically of the country, which is very unheard of because his family does not have magic, and they kind of had to overthrow the people who did have magic. There's a lot more to it, but I'm trying to like keep it bare here, or to the bare bones here. But so our hero hears of Kat, and he hears that she has this ability. She is a kingmaker, they call her, because she can tell when anyone is lying. So obviously that's very useful to anybody trying to rule a kingdom. So he kind of tries to seek her out. He kind of figures out what she is and wants to basically like use her abilities to help him. Kat is like, no. So the two of them are like oil and water, and I love it. They are so good. It's definitely like a hate to friends to love, I'd say. Like they kind of like tolerate each other, and then whew, it's just such a good one. Like the romance in this is one of my absolute favorites, as well as the fantasy elements. I just thought were really well done. I thought it was really unique. But it wasn't so like high fantasy that I felt like overwhelmed or like I couldn't follow along. So I definitely love this one. Check it out if you haven't already. Another favorite was C.L. Wilson's The Winter King. This one is definitely, to me, a little bit more higher fantasy. Like there were just some elements in here. There's definitely a lot of world building and things like that. It's definitely a chunky book, so definitely like settle in with this one, but it was a great book. So in this book, we have our main characters who we have like the Winter King, hence the title. And he has recently, like there's been this war going on between like winter and summer for a very long time. And winter has recently won. And so to kind of have peace, I guess, between the countries, the Summer King is giving his daughter as a bride to the Winter King. Now this is kind of supposed to be as like a punishment for his daughter because the Winter King, or the Summer King, is not a nice person at all. So, but rather than being this punishment, obviously at the beginning, she's not thrilled at all. But I think she finally kind of figures out this is actually her first taste of like freedom, away from her father and away from this like castle that she's been kind of trapped in. And that even though the Winter King comes off as very like rough and kind of brutal, he lets her have a lot more freedom, and she kind of tries to figure out who she is. And there's a lot more to the story than that, but I really, really liked this a lot. It's been a while since I've read it though, so this one, along with another one, I kind of want to reread. There is a couple more books in this series, but I have not picked them up yet. So this is the only one I've read from this, but I really, really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna lie, this is not my favorite cover, but aside from that, it's a great book, so definitely pick this one up. Next one, another one with a cover that I'm a little like, is How to Tame a Beast in 7 Days by Carolyn Sparks. I know when I read this book a couple years ago, I talked about it a lot because I was loving it, and I still really enjoyed it. I just haven't read it in a while, so this is the other one that I'm like, I need to reread that. But the idea of this is so cool. So basically there's people called Embraced, and they have these like magical abilities. So our heroine has this magical ability, as well as the hero. So our heroine has basically been sent to this isle in the middle of nowhere by her father for protection when she was really young. So the story starts out when she is actually called back, and after all these years her father is like, you need to come back, you need to help me, like if you don't come back I'm gonna be in deep, deep trouble. And so she is kind of like, okay. So it turns out there is an arranged marriage between her and who they call like the Beast, who is, I think his name's Leo, yeah, and he is very like rough. Again, I feel like there's like a theme in these books, but he is also embraced, and the thing with him is he's very powerful, but he can't touch people, we think, because it's very dangerous and he can actually kill them by his touch. So this book is full of like forced proximity, like that whole angst because like they can't touch. At least we think they can't touch, and it was just so good. It was one of those books that you just could not put down, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought the magic system in this was really cool and really different. I thought the fantasy elements were really fun, and this is another one, like I said, I want to reread. There is a second book and maybe a third one in this series, but it's about different characters. For most of these, the next books are about like a different couple. So yeah, I really like this. I don't love this cover. I just think they could have done such a cool fantasy cover. So anyways, but I really enjoyed it, and I really, really liked Carolyn Sparks' writing. Another author that I just want to recommend in general is Grace Draven. Two of my favorites from her that I've read is Radiance, and then the sequel to that, which is Eidolon. I'll put up a picture. I don't own these. I don't own them on my Kindles, but I really want to get some or own them because I love that one. I think Radiance is one of the more well-known kind of like fantasy romance books, which it totally deserves that like hype because I loved it. That book is basically about two people from very different races having to get married, and it's very much so, again, like a marriage of convenience, and it's about them really becoming friends because the way that their races work, they both find each other like outwardly very not pleasant to look at. So it's very much so about like falling in love with the person inside rather than the outside package. I love Grace Draven's writing. It's fantastic. So if you haven't read Radiance, I highly recommend that one. And then I read last year Phoenix Unbound by her, and I really, really, really enjoyed that one. I believe there is a sequel supposed to be coming for this, but I'm not sure when, but I'm very excited for whenever it does come. So Phoenix Unbound, I thought was such an interesting idea. And I obviously don't read a ton of fantasy, but for me, it seemed really unique. So in this book, there is this like, I don't know if it's like a competition, but basically all of the villages have to submit this like tribute basically every year to like fight or go in this competition where basically everybody dies. It's a little fuzzy, but I remember it's kind of like, I don't remember if they're fighting or if they were like a tribute, and basically end of story is that whoever gets sent in dies. So our main hero or heroine, our main character, is sent year after year because she has magical abilities where she does not die. Like she cannot be killed. And she also can change her appearance. So her village, who are not nice people, send her every year over and over again because they're like, well, you can't die. But she's also tortured every year and has no life because of this. So this year when the book starts, she is trying to escape. She wants to get out of there, obviously, and she needs help. And so the hero of the story is one of the people who actually works in the competition, but he is very much so forced to be there as well. He's kind of like a guard type thing, and he figures out that it's the same person from last year. And so he figures out, oh my gosh, like she's not being killed, and is very intrigued and thinks that they can help each other kind of escape from this competition. I really loved it. There's so much more to the story with like the world building and all the magic and things like that. There was a lot going on in this story, but that's kind of like the bare minimum to hopefully like get you sucked in. I loved it, and I could not put that one down either. Okay, so another one that I recently read and talked about is A Promise of Darkness, and I am blanking on the author, but I will put a picture up. I talked about this one just like last week or a couple weeks ago in my recent reads, but this one was great if you want something that definitely has like Court of Thorns and Roses feel, some Hades and Persephone kind of like undertones. Definitely pick this one up. It's by Beck McMaster. That's who the author is. I loved the writing, and I thought that it was really well done. So in this story, our female character is basically sent to live with another kingdom and king for 3 months in return for something he wants. And there's a lot of twists and turns. They perhaps have some kind of backstory that gets revealed. I really loved it. I loved how it's a lot of different layers to this story that the reader kind of figures out as they go. And I love this cover. I think this one's really, really pretty. So definitely pick this one up. It's a pretty new release. So yeah, and I don't think it was too expensive on Kindle if you want to read it that way. Another one I wanted to mention that is kind of straddling that line between YA fantasy with a romance and a fantasy romance is Bring Me Their Hearts by Sarah Wolf. It's definitely in the YA section at the bookstore, but I love this book, and I personally do think it kind of, like I said, it's very close to that fantasy romance line to me. So if you want to check out something that is YA and you're more of like an adult romance reader, definitely check out Bring Me Their Hearts. The sequel just came out, which I'm so excited to read. But in this one, it's about Heartless. Basically, you're heartless and a witch owns your heart. The main character in this book is trying to get her heart back, and so she's sent to do this task with a prince in order to get it back. It's kind of the bare minimum. I'm definitely going to talk more about this book in a recent or upcoming recent reads because I'm reading the sequel right now. But I wanted to throw this in there just briefly because I think if you want a YA book that to me reads more like a new adult / adult romance, I think this is a great place to start. Last one I want to mention briefly is the book Trick by Natalia Jaster. I am currently reading it, so that's why I wanted to just add it on the end, but I can already tell I'm 50% through and loving it. This is actually the book that we have picked for the Lovely Ladies book club that myself and Avery and Jen and Stacy do, and I'm so excited that we're reading it because it's been on my radar for like a couple of years, and I'm finally getting to it, and I'm really pumped. So in this one, it's about a jester and a princess, and it's so good. Like, how good is this cover? I'm loving it. It's so good. I wanted to throw this out there. The writing is so beautiful. Like, I am loving it. I'm listening to the audiobook too. So I will have more to say about this in probably next week's video, but in the meantime, if you have not picked this up, it is on Kindle Unlimited. I think we all should pick it up because I don't know why I put it off for so stinking long. Okay guys, so those are all of my personal favorite fantasy romance novels. please let me know if you have any other really good recommendations, because this is one of my favorite subgenres, and I feel like sometimes it's harder to find these or find ones that I really love in this subgenre. So please let me know if you have any good recommendations that I didn't talk about today. Also, if you read any of these and you love them, let me know that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!